Redbull's rivals are prepared to challenge the champions after cheating allegations. Ferrari has outlined their new technical team, and Haas is in a strong position to move up the grid. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Outgoing Alpine team principal Bruno Famin believes that if the team placed a Mercedes or Ferrari engine in their car, the integration will be already very, very good. Alpine appears set to take on customer status in the coming seasons as staff at their Viry-Châtillon engine base are deployed onto other projects. But while Famin admitted such a change is never easy, a switch appears likely in this department at this time. Famin, who will be departing his role as team principal by the end of August to make way for high-tech GP boss Oliver Oakes, stated the move has come as a result of the team looking at their resources and deciding how best to deploy them moving forward. Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff said he is open-minded about the possibility of having Alpine as engine customers, with Aston Martin moving away from Mercedes power and into their own factory deal with Honda from 2026. Honda, Audi, and Red Bull powertrains will be on the grid from 2026, but the two most established names to choose for a customer deal would be those of Mercedes and Ferrari, should Renault confirm their decision to step away from manufacturing a 2026 power unit. When asked why Alpine are potentially taking a step back from being a manufacturer in Formula One, Famin replied to media including PlanetF1.com. Because we are at a very specific crossroads where the project for developing the Alpine brand is now very concrete, very clear. We know the resources needed for developing it, and on the other hand, we know that for the 2026 car generation in Formula One, it's now that the chassis regulations have been published a few weeks ago. It's now that we have to decide because, again, the guy designing the chassis needs to know with which PU they are going to use. It's not why before, it's because now the question at the Alpine brand point of view is how do we use in the best possible way for developing the brand the resources we have. Given the potential move to customer status, which has not yet been confirmed, Famin mentioned that if two other power units were placed into the current car, they would be in a strong position. However, when asked if this was the first step towards selling the team, he firmly denied this was the case. There is a bit of potential in developing the integration, but it's quite theoretical at the end of the story, because now all the PU manufacturers are working very closely, very early in the project with the teams, and all the integration are incredibly optimized, he said. And if we take a Ferrari or Mercedes engine, I'm quite convinced that all the integration, all the packaging will be already very, very good. Then to answer the question of selling, no, the Formula One project remains a key project for the Alpine brand. It's thanks to Formula One that we want to develop the brand awareness globally. That remains, but the project is just reallocating the resources to develop the brand better, always based on the pillar of motorsport, and mainly Formula One to develop the awareness. Regarding a meeting at the team's engine base in Viry to inform the staff of their change in direction, Famin confirmed that no jobs will be lost in this process. He confirmed, a very important thing in the project which has been presented, every single employee will be offered a job. There is no redundancy at all, and we are doing everything to make potentially, because again, it's still a project, but if it's confirmed, to make a very difficult moment as less painful as possible. But we know it's never easy, this kind of thing. Come next year's Belgian Grand Prix, McLaren team boss Andrea Stella hopes the quest to be Formula One's benchmark, even on low-drag tracks, will be complete. Since Stella took the reins at McLaren ahead of the 2023 campaign, he has overseen a rapid rise up the grid for the iconic team, which has gone from having one of the slowest cars at that stage to now one of the fastest on the grid, or the fastest as some observers claim. With 2 race wins achieved in F1 2024, plus 8 runner-up results, McLaren have thrust themselves right into the battle for Constructors' Championship glory, with the gap to leaders Red Bull only 42 points with 10 rounds of the season left to go. However, Stella still sees work to do, with performance on tracks which demand lower drag levels for higher top speeds, an area where progress is needed. McLaren are only 50% there in fixing that deficiency, according to Stella, who by the time Formula One returns to Spa next season, hopes the quest is completed to remove the asterisk of low-drag tracks when it comes to McLaren having the most efficient car. Asked by media including PlanetF1.com whether he is confident that McLaren's weakness of low-drag tracks is now solved, Oscar Piastri finishing P2 at Spa after race winner George Russell's disqualification while Lando Norris took P5, Stella replied, "I think we have gone 50% of the journey. I'm more confident that at high downforce, we have the car in a good place, like the car does what we want in terms of especially aerodynamic behavior. But we haven't yet done a lot of development at lower drag level. So to me, it's not a surprise that in Belgium, we were not as competitive as Hungary. And it's not a surprise that for the same, or a little bit better top speed, still, we were losing quite a bit in the second sector. It means that if we want to gain speed, we'll give up quite a lot of grip. But I hope that in the future, possibly next year in Belgium, we have completed this quest to have the most efficient car even when top speed is important. Norris, who picked up his first and only F1 victory so far at the 2024 Miami GP, remains in the hunt for the Drivers' Championship, his deficit to leader Max Verstappen currently 78 points. Haas are exceeding all expectations in 2024, having secured 27 points in 13 rounds. The American team have completely changed the narrative that surrounded them heading into this year. Ayao Komatsu deserves huge credit for the turnaround at Haas, especially given the effectiveness of the upgrades introduced in Silverstone. The Japanese team principal believes that in previous years, baseless excuses were made for poor development. When Komatsu was appointed in January, he was adamant there was more potential for Haas to unlock. He argued that inefficiency and poor coordination were the team's main limitations. The 48-year-old made clear that increased funding would not provide instant solutions. This assessment, whilst unpopular at the time, has proven extremely accurate in the months since. Not only did Haas address their excessive tire degradation in testing, after Komatsu implemented an aggressive run plan focusing on race simulations, but the team's mid-season updates have unlocked significant performance. Prior to this season, Haas were a team who habitually fell behind in the development race. Considering that big teams like Ferrari and Aston Martin have struggled, Komatsu's personnel deserve huge credit for making steady progress. Speaking in an interview with Racing News 365, Ayao Komatsu spoke candidly about the team's old approach. There was always some excuse for poor development. Like, okay, this year we are not developing because we are just preparing for next year. For 2023, there was no excuse. Then what happened in 2023 is because we didn't fundamentally address the issues of 2019. That is people being in denial, pointing the finger at certain things. And we were never working properly as a team. That was totally clear. Although Haas works with significantly fewer resources than other teams, their typical mid-season decline can be attributed to several factors beyond this. This has now been identified, with the team working on improved coordination, planning, and organization in 2024. Of course, this does not take away the inherent limitations that come with having inferior infrastructure. However, Komatsu's new direction has contributed to creating a far more competitive F1 outfit. Ferrari has raced 14 events with an average points per event of 24.64, about 6 points event more than last year. Between ups and downs, in the Constructors' Championship, the red car will show up in Holland not far from Redbull with 29.14 points a race, and in the wake of a McLaren 26.14. Nevertheless, the races immediately after Zandvoort will determine whether Ferrari will be able to return to scoring big points to hang on to the leaders and fend off Mercedes. The trend of the latest performances after Monaco has forced the Maranello team to always run on the defensive, managing the misstep in terms of development. The first fixes came very quickly, but could not solve the problem. The bottom used at Spa was a mixture of the best parts already known and optimized in the area of the keel and extraction to reduce the peak load at high speeds, where the SF24s will have very low downforce wings in the now classic Monza specification. The corrected version of the floor simply aims to stabilize the platform to increase drivability and use the untapped potential of the SF24, while the fight for high positions is tight. F1 activities will resume on the Monday before the Dutch Grand Prix, which may provide more data on the effects of the deformation of the front tire profiles. It is no coincidence that it is said that the most delicate part to change on these cars is the design of the front wing. Mike Elliott is the senior figure currently free, but there is no interest from Vasseur. Loic Serra will therefore be called upon to play his cards as technical director and chassis manager after refusing to follow Enrico Cardile to Aston Martin. Curiously, the arrival of Loic Serra in a role as technical director will complete the circle of a career parallel to that of Pierre Wache, Ferrari's first and unattainable dream. Mattia Binotto tried first and Frédéric Vasseur himself second, but Christian Horner did everything to keep him in Red Bull with more than one renewal in a short time. Michelin first, BMW Sauber then separating between Red Bull and Mercedes, initially with a similar role related to responsibility for vehicle dynamics. In Mercedes, he was closed first by James Allison and then by Mike Elliott, and finally again by the former Ferrari. Loic Serra is mainly in charge of suspension, chassis, and tires, while in Red Bull, under the wing of Adrian Newey, Pierre Wache has also grown in aerodynamics, then taking on the effective role of technical director. In Ferrari, the possibility has opened up for Serra to have a larger boundary than the one he enjoyed in Mercedes, and so he will come to play a role similar to that of his friend Wache, albeit in a slightly different organizational chart, with a trio of DTs responsible for chassis aerodynamics vehicle. To date, with the addition of Serra to the well-known Seven Bello, that trio will be composed of Serra Tondi Montecchi. In Mercedes, he was closed first by James Allison and then by Mike Elliott, and finally again by the former Ferrari. Loic Serra is mainly in charge of suspension, chassis, and tires, while in Red Bull, under the wing of Adrian Newey, Pierre Wache has also grown in aerodynamics, then taking on the effective role of technical director. In Ferrari, the possibility has opened up for Serra to have a larger boundary than the one he enjoyed in Mercedes, and so he will come to play a role similar to that of his friend Wache, albeit in a slightly different organizational chart, with a trio of DTs responsible for chassis aerodynamics vehicle. To date, with the addition of Serra to the well-known Seven Bello, that trio will be made up of, with a Ferrari organization chart that has changed a lot in the last period, with a lot of turnover and many external technicians who have arrived in Maranello. Meanwhile, for the 2025 car, it is now time for the first final decisions, something that wants to meet more driving styles and preferences that are not so opposite between Leclerc and Hamilton, and which will inevitably be decidedly more similar than the current ones. Sky F1's Ted Kravitz said he has seen new Alpine team principal Oliver Oakes around the paddock, with Red Bull's Christian Horner and Helmut Marko detailing their long-standing association. With Bruno Famin departing the Alpine team boss role after just a year in it, now moving across to oversee the Vieri engine base, Alpine named 36-year-old high-tech GP team boss Oliver Oakes as Famin's successor. Speaking on the Sky F1 podcast, Kravitz would compare Oakes to another big mover in Jonathan Wheatley, who it was announced will leave the Red Bull sporting director role to become Audi team principal. Kravitz would detail a long-standing connection between Oakes, Red Bull senior advisor driver program boss Marko, and Red Bull team principal Horner, reflected in the trio being seen together around the paddock. Oakes was in fact previously part of the Red Bull junior team, while his high-tech squad has fielded various Red Bull juniors in their lineups over the years, including Liam Lawson, Isaac Hadjar, Dennis Hauger, Jack Crawford, Juri Vips, and Ayumu Iwasa. On Oakes taking his first step into F1 team management with Alpine, Kravitz said, "In a sense, I don't suppose we should be surprised, because with his high-tech Grand Prix organization, he did apply, along with Andretti Global, to get an entry into Formula One. Now, it was only Andretti who were granted permission by the FIA. High-tech were told, not now, but not never. Go back and have a think and strengthen up your bid and then come back." And of course, we know what's happened since with Formula One, saying that there's no room at the inn for Andretti. But Oakes is the ambitious guy. He's used to being a team principal, which is where he differs from Jonathan Wheatley, and it's just never been a team principal in Formula One. And unlike Wheatley, and they're quite interesting comparisons, Oakes has never directly had a job in Formula One. But he does have experience of being a team principal. He runs teams very successfully in Formula 2, Formula 3, and Formula 4, and has tried to get into Formula 1. Now, what we don't know is whether Oakes is going to continue to be the boss of high-tech. I assume he is, but I think he only starts after the summer break, so I'm sure we'll hear that in due course. But he's an ex-Red Bull young driver. He won the World Karting Championship in 2005, a kind of contemporary of Valtteri Bottas, that kind of era of driver. And I've seen him around the place with Christian Horner and Helmut Marko, because he runs many of the Red Bull junior drivers in the lower formulas, and so Oakes does a lot of work with Helmut Marko and Christian Horner in what they do with their young drivers. So he's well known to those two. He's well known to Flavio Briatore, who's now the executive advisor to Luca De Meo, the Renault boss, and Oliver seems to have impressed Flavio Briatore. Flavio seems to have seen something in Oliver Oakes that he likes and admires, maybe reminds Flavio of a younger himself way back when. And Flavio has recommended, it seems, to Luca De Meo that he, Oakes, is the next team principal, as he's been now appointed, of the Alpine team, which, let's not forget, is the Renault Works team in Formula One. So it's a big job, in terms of status, being the team principal of a Works Formula One team. And it's a big job in terms of the job list of things he has to do to get Alpine actually back to competitiveness. But they're all making the right noises about his ability to do that. And despite it being his first job in Formula One, I think a lot of people think that Oaks has got a very good chance of success in there because he knows how race teams work. Alpine sit P8 in the current F1 2024 Constructors' Championship standings with 11 points scored. Toto Wolff has set Mercedes the target of pushing into the top 3 of both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championship in the remainder of the season. The Silver Arrows headed into the summer break off the back of 3 wins in 4 races, split between George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, but still sit 79 points behind Ferrari in 3rd with 10 races to go. Hamilton and Russell also sit 6th and 8th in the drivers' standings respectively heading into the final part of the season, but with the order ever changing, Hamilton is currently 27 points behind 3rd-placed Charles Leclerc. With the W15 having made huge progress as the season has gone on, Mercedes have put themselves among McLaren and Redbull as the leading teams on the grid as it stands. Given that, team principal and CEO Wolff wants to see that rate of improvement continue in the points tally and has set the team the target of breaking into the top 3 of both the drivers' and constructors' standings come the end of the season. We saw a real correlation between the virtual world, the tunnel, the simulator, and the track. It was a sense of relief, but also motivating, Wolff said when discussing the team's improvements at the start of the European season. We knew what performance we had to bring to the track. The factory worked incredibly hard to bring this as quickly and efficiently as possible. Pole in Canada did not come as a surprise to us, therefore. We started to see many sessions that looked positive, not just on Friday when the track was green and where we had been misled in the past. That has resulted in an upturn in fortunes. 3 victories in the past 4 races is testament to that. It has come from a lot of hard work and dedication from everyone at Brackley and Brixworth. The difference now from the start of the season, therefore, is that we have a car that can score solid points every week. We also have 2 top drivers that are able to make that happen. We have more work to do to be in the fight for victory every weekend. We have made good steps forward, and we have a car that can perform near the front of the field. It is difficult to say what will happen in the final 10 races. The competitive order between the top 4 is close. That is a good thing, though, as it is making the sport incredibly exciting. We will be pushing hard to fight for more victories and aiming to get top 3 in both championships. That's the video for today. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.